She's with me now, the billionaire CEO said. Her family finally saw who they had lost. CEO love stories. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's emotional story about two women whose unexpected connection will challenge everything they thought they knew about success, family, and love, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. It is quick, it is free, and it helps us continue bringing you more heartfelt, dramatic, and unforgettable stories about courage, healing, second chances, and love between women. Your support truly means the world to us. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now let us return to our main character, Claire Donovan, and the moment her life began to change. Do you ever wonder how long a family can love you without actually seeing you? I thought about that question while standing in my parents' kitchen on a cold November evening, scraping untouched mashed potatoes from expensive china into the trash. My name is Claire Donovan. I was 36 years old, and 30 minutes earlier, I had made the mistake of believing my family might finally understand why my work mattered to me. Dinner had begun as a celebration for my older brother, Michael, who had just made partner at a financial firm in downtown Chicago. My father opened a bottle of wine he had been saving for years. My mother ordered Michael's favorite chocolate cake. Everyone raised a glass while my brother smiled beneath the warm dining room lights. I was proud of him. I truly was. Then my mother asked about my job. I told them our housing assistance program had helped 31 families remain in their homes during the past 2 months. I told them about a mother who no longer had to move her children away from their school. I told them about an elderly couple who had nearly lost the apartment where they had lived for 27 years. For perhaps 20 seconds I thought my father was listening. Then he placed his fork beside his plate and asked, "And when are you going back to a real career?" The table became painfully quiet. "This is my career," I said. My mother gave me the sympathetic smile I had come to hate. "Your father only means you had so much potential in finance." Potential. In my family, that word had become another way of describing everything I had disappointed them by refusing to become. "I like what I do." "Liking something is not the same as building a future," Dad replied. Michael looked uncomfortable, but he said nothing. I could have argued. Years earlier, I would have defended every choice until my voice shook. Instead, I smiled, carried the dishes into the kitchen, and started cleaning. A few minutes later, my mother called everyone together for a photograph. I was still rinsing plates when the camera flashed from the dining room. Through the doorway, I saw my family gathered behind Michael. My chair sat empty at the edge of the table. Nobody had meant anything by it. Somehow that made it hurt more. I left shortly afterward and drove back toward Chicago beneath a thin, freezing rain. At a red light, my phone vibrated inside my purse. When I reached my apartment building, I checked it. The message was from Elizabeth Harrington. I read the name twice. Elizabeth Harrington was the billionaire chief executive officer of Harrington Holdings and chairwoman of the foundation where I worked. I had met her only in crowded meetings. Women like Elizabeth did not personally message employees like me at 9:47 at night. Then I read the sentence beneath her name. "Claire, report to my office tomorrow at 8. We need to discuss the Caldwell donation." My stomach tightened. 3 days earlier, I had rejected a multimillion-dollar donation without waiting for executive approval. The donor had demanded conditions I could not accept, and I had known there might be consequences. I just had not expected those consequences to come directly from Elizabeth Harrington. The next morning, I entered the glass tower 15 minutes early. The elevator climbed past floor 30, then 40. With every soft chime, my heartbeat seemed louder. When the doors finally opened onto the executive floor, Elizabeth was already waiting beyond the glass conference room doors, a thick folder resting on the table before her. She looked directly at me and said, "Close the door, Claire." At that moment, I was certain I was about to lose my job. I closed the door and remained standing until Elizabeth Harrington gestured toward the chair across from her. "Sit, Claire." Her voice was calm, which somehow made me more nervous. Morning light filled the conference room, reflecting from glass walls and the polished table between us. Elizabeth wore a charcoal suit and white blouse, every detail composed, while I was painfully aware that I had spent half the night imagining unemployment. She opened the folder. The Caldwell Group offered the foundation $3.1 million. Yes. And you rejected it. Yes. Elizabeth studied me. Without authorization. I swallowed. Yes. She turned several pages. Explain. I had rehearsed an apology during the elevator ride, but suddenly I could not say it. They wanted 12 families removed from the campaign. Why? Their marketing team reviewed the profiles and decided those families were not suitable for the public launch. Elizabeth's expression barely changed. Not suitable in what way? One family is living with grandparents while the parents rebuild their finances. Another includes a father who lost his job after caring for his wife. Caldwell wanted stories that looked simpler, happier, more inspiring. I leaned forward before I could stop myself. They wanted hardship that photographed well. Silence settled between us. And you told them no, Elizabeth said. I told them we could discuss branding, event placement, and recognition. We could not discuss which struggling families deserved dignity. Her eyes remained on mine. $3.1 million could help a great many people. I know. Then why risk losing it? My hands tightened beneath the table. Because if dignity depends on whether somebody looks good in an advertisement, then it is not dignity anymore. For several seconds, Elizabeth said nothing. I wondered whether I had just made my situation worse. Then she closed the folder. Yesterday afternoon, 2 members of the foundation leadership team recommended disciplinary action. My stomach dropped. I understand. No, I do not think you do. She rose and walked toward the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. The housing initiative has been delayed for nearly 2 months. Every meeting becomes a discussion about donors, metrics, publicity, and operating costs. She turned back toward me. Nobody asks what the families need until you enter the room. I stared at her. I am not being fired. You violated procedure. We will address that separately. There was the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. But no, Claire. I am not firing you. Elizabeth placed a second folder on the table. I want you on the leadership team for the housing initiative. I looked down at it, then back at her. Why me? Because everyone else who reviewed the Caldwell proposal saw $3.1 million. She paused. You saw 12 families. Something inside me shifted. Less than 24 hours earlier, my father had questioned whether I had a real career. Now one of the most successful women in the country was asking me to help lead the largest project I had ever touched. There are people more qualified than I am. There are people with better titles, Elizabeth replied. That is not the same thing. I opened the folder slowly. The project covered multiple Chicago neighborhoods and carried a budget larger than anything I had managed before. My excitement collided with fear. What if I am not ready? Elizabeth returned to her chair. Then become ready. It was not reassurance. Strangely, it was better. She was not promising that I would succeed. She was giving me the chance to prove that I could. As I stood to leave, Elizabeth spoke again. Claire. I turned. Next time you intend to reject $3 million, call me first. I almost smiled. Would you have approved it? She considered the question. After this conversation? A small smile appeared. Probably. I walked toward the elevator carrying the new folder against my chest. For years I had believed being seen would feel like applause. I had been wrong. Sometimes it was quieter than that. Sometimes it was simply someone looking past your title, your salary, and everyone else's expectations and asking what you believed was worth protecting. 3 weeks into the new housing initiative, I discovered that Elizabeth Harrington could remember a 12-page financial forecast after reading it once, negotiate with 3 executives at the same time, and somehow still forget where she left her coffee. It is beside your laptop, I told her during our Monday morning meeting. Elizabeth glanced down at the untouched cup. How long has that been there? 40 minutes. Why did you not tell me? I assumed a billionaire could locate her own coffee. She looked at me over the top of the report in her hands. You are becoming unusually comfortable around me, Claire. You promoted me for speaking honestly. I am beginning to understand the consequences of that decision. The smallest smile appeared before she returned to the report. Moments like that had become increasingly common. We spent long days visiting partner organizations across Chicago, reviewing applications, meeting landlords, and listening to families explain what a spreadsheet could never capture. Elizabeth approached every obstacle with the same instinct. Find resources, build a system, remove the obstacle. I respected that. But sometimes people needed something before solutions. During a visit to a community center on the South Side, we met Rebecca Hayes, a mother raising 2 young children while working full-time at a grocery store. Her hours had been reduced, her car needed repairs, and she was struggling to keep up with rent. Elizabeth immediately began discussing emergency assistance and transportation funding. Rebecca nodded politely, but her fingers remained tightly folded in her lap. "How is Sophie doing at her new school?" I asked. Rebecca looked at me in surprise. "You remembered?" She was nervous about starting 3rd grade. Rebecca's shoulders relaxed. "She loves her teacher." For the next 15 minutes we talked about her children, her work schedule, and what would actually make her situation more stable. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan that included temporary rental support, reliable transportation, and after-school care near her apartment. When Rebecca stood to leave, she squeezed my hand. "Thank you for remembering I am a person before I am a case number." I glanced across the room. Elizabeth was watching me. On the drive downtown, she remained unusually quiet. "Did I miss something?" I finally asked. "No. You have been staring out the window for 10 minutes. I am thinking. That sounds dangerous." Elizabeth turned toward me, and I expected the usual controlled expression. Instead, she looked almost amused. "You do something I cannot teach people." "What?" "You make them feel safe before you ask them to trust the solution." I considered that. Maybe because the solution is not always the first thing they need. "What is?" "To know someone sees them." Her gaze stayed on me for a moment longer than necessary, and suddenly I became aware of the quiet car, the gray afternoon beyond the windows, and how close we were sitting. I looked away first. That night, I returned to the office after dinner because I had forgotten a folder. The building was nearly empty. When the elevator opened on the executive floor, a single office was still illuminated. Elizabeth sat behind her desk surrounded by reports, Chicago glowing beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her coffee sat untouched beside her again. "It is almost midnight," I said from the doorway. She looked up. "So I have been informed. Do you ever go home?" Something changed in her face. The executive confidence faded for just a second. "Eventually." That was not my question. Elizabeth looked past me toward the empty hallway. When she answered, her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "Sometimes home is just another place where nobody is waiting for you." I stopped smiling. Outside those windows, Elizabeth Harrington seemed powerful enough to own half the city. Sitting alone beneath the office lights, she looked like a woman who had spent years discovering that success could fill a building without filling a life. By Friday afternoon, the weather reports were warning that Chicago would get the kind of winter storm people promised themselves they were prepared for until it actually arrived. Elizabeth and I were at the Southside Community Center reviewing housing applications when freezing rain began tapping against the windows. Within an hour, several nearby blocks had lost power, buses were delayed, and families started arriving at the center looking for somewhere warm to wait. I expected Elizabeth to call her driver and return downtown. Instead, she removed her expensive coat, rolled up the sleeves of her white blouse, and looked at me. "Tell me what needs doing." "Blankets are downstairs. Food is in the kitchen. Someone needs to organize the registration table." "Which job is worst?" "The kitchen." "I will take the kitchen." I stared at her. "Can you cook?" "I run an international company." That was not my question. 20 minutes later, I discovered that Elizabeth could restructure a corporation, but could not operate an industrial coffee maker without reading the instructions twice. I laughed when she accidentally filled 2 empty cups before realizing she had forgotten to put coffee into the machine. "Not one word, Claire. I have several words. Keep them to yourself." But she was smiling. As evening settled over the neighborhood, the center filled with families, volunteers, blankets, paper cups, and the quiet uncertainty that comes when nobody knows how long a storm will last. Elizabeth stopped being the woman whose name appeared on buildings. She carried supply boxes, served soup, found phone chargers, and listened patiently while an elderly woman explained why she needed to reach her daughter in Milwaukee. There were no cameras, no reporters, nobody important enough to impress. That mattered to me. Near 9 o'clock, I found Elizabeth sitting at a folding table beside a little girl named Emma, helping her build a house from construction paper. Emma looked from Elizabeth to me. "Are you two family?" My breath caught. Elizabeth's eyes met mine across the table. "We work together," I said. Emma frowned as if adults were unnecessarily complicated. "You act like family." Later, when most people had settled for the night, Elizabeth and I sat near a window with vending machine coffee warming our hands. Snow had replaced the rain, turning the street outside almost silent. "My father thinks I wasted my life," I said. I had not planned to tell her. "Because you left finance?" Elizabeth asked. "Because I chose something he cannot brag about at dinner." I watched snow collect along the window. Sometimes I still wonder whether I made the wrong choice. "Do you want your old life back?" "No." "Then perhaps you do not miss the life. You miss their approval." The accuracy of it stung. I looked at her. "You make that sound easy." "It is not." Elizabeth lowered her eyes to her coffee. "My parents believed achievement was proof of character. I learned very young that success earned attention. Did it earn love?" She was quiet for several seconds. "I spent 30 years pretending those were the same thing." Something inside me softened. The billionaire and the community worker suddenly seemed like two women who had learned the same lesson in different houses. "Maybe that is why you never go home," I said. Elizabeth gave me a tired smile. "Maybe." Our hands rested on the table only inches apart. Neither of us moved closer, but I felt the distance as clearly as if it had become something physical. Then Elizabeth looked directly at me. "Claire, your family did not stop seeing you because you became less worthy. They stopped recognizing you when you stopped becoming who they expected." I swallowed hard. Outside, snow continued falling over Chicago. Inside, titles, salaries, and status seemed strangely irrelevant. For the first time, I was not sitting beside Elizabeth Harrington, Billionaire Chief Executive Officer. I was sitting beside a woman who understood exactly what it cost to spend years earning approval and still feel alone. For the next 2 weeks, Elizabeth and I behaved as though nothing had happened during the storm. We discussed budgets, reviewed housing applications, visited community partners, and never mentioned the conversation beside that snowy window. But pretending nothing had changed did not make it true. I noticed her differently now. I noticed when she saved me a seat before meetings, when she remembered that I preferred tea after lunch, and when her expression softened whenever I challenged an idea everyone else had accepted without question. I also noticed how often I looked for her when I entered a room. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, everything shifted. I had just finished presenting our latest housing projections to the foundation board when one member leaned back in his chair. "The numbers are promising, Claire, but some people are beginning to question how much access you have to Elizabeth." My face grew warm. "I have access because I lead the community side of this initiative." "Of course," he said, although his tone suggested otherwise. Elizabeth ended the discussion immediately and moved the meeting forward. But afterward she asked me to come to her office. She closed the door behind us. "There is something we need to discuss. If this is about what he said, I can handle gossip." "I know you can." Elizabeth remained standing behind her desk. "That does not mean you should have to." She placed a folder in front of me. The first page carried the name of a partner organization in Boston. Beneath it was a leadership position with a salary almost twice what I earned. I stared at her. "What is this?" "An opportunity. You would lead their housing program. You would have complete independence, a larger budget, and no reporting relationship with me. You arranged this?" I made several calls. My chest tightened. "Without asking me." "Claire, listen to me. If people decide your advancement happened because of our relationship, they can damage everything you have worked for." "What relationship?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Elizabeth went silent. For one suspended moment, neither of us looked away. "Exactly," she finally said. "There should not be a question anyone can use against you." I pushed the folder back across the desk. "I do not want Boston. You have not even considered it. Neither did you consider asking me." I was trying to protect you. There it was. The sentence sounded painfully familiar. My father had protected me by choosing the career he thought I should want. My mother had protected me by explaining which ambitions were respectable. Now Elizabeth was protecting me by arranging another life without asking whether I wanted it. You did not protect my choice, I said quietly. You removed it. Her expression changed. That was not my intention. Intentions do not make decisions belong to me. Claire, this position could transform your career. Maybe, but it is still my career. Elizabeth looked at the folder as if she were finally seeing it from my side of the desk. Then forget Boston. Stay. I wanted those words to be enough. 2 weeks earlier they might have been. But something had become clear to me. I could not spend my life demanding that my family respect my choices while accepting the same behavior from someone simply because I cared about her. I cannot stay like this. Elizabeth's face went still. What are you saying? I am resigning. The words frightened me, but they also felt clean. Certain. I will submit my written resignation to Human Resources today and complete whatever transition period they require. Claire, you do not have to do this. I know. I held her gaze. That is why it matters. For once, Elizabeth did not reach for a solution. She did not make a call, offer more money, or tell me what would happen next. She simply stood there while I chose something she did not want. And when I walked out of her office, my heart hurt more than I expected, because the first woman who had truly seen me had also become the woman I now had to leave in order to keep seeing myself. The first morning after I submitted my resignation, I woke at 6:15 and reached for my phone before remembering there was no executive meeting waiting for me. No housing report. No message from Elizabeth asking whether I had reviewed some impossible spreadsheet before breakfast. The silence should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt unfamiliar. I missed the work. I missed the families. And more than I wanted to admit, I missed her. But missing someone did not mean I had made the wrong decision. During my final transition weeks, Elizabeth remained professional and distant. She approved every handoff I requested and never mentioned Boston again. On my last afternoon, she did not ask me to reconsider. She simply shook my hand and said, "Whatever you build next, Claire, make sure it belongs to you." 3 days later, a letter arrived at my apartment. There was no company letterhead, only Elizabeth's handwriting. Claire, I confused having the power to make a decision with having the right to make it. I am sorry. I will not ask you to return. I hope whatever comes next is yours because you chose it. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after reading those words. The apology did not erase what had happened, but it gave me something explanations never could. Space. Over the next month, I turned my dining table into a planning office. I called former colleagues, neighborhood organizations, landlords, social workers, and local businesses. I used part of my savings to rent 2 small rooms above a family-owned bakery on the west side. The floors creaked. The radiator complained every morning. Our first donated desk leaned slightly to the left. I loved every imperfect inch of it. I called the program Second Door Chicago because I wanted people to know that one closed door did not mean there was nowhere else to go. We began modestly, connecting families with rental assistance, transportation resources, child care programs, and legal support through existing community partners. 7 families came during our first week. By the 4th week, there were 26. Nobody called me a founder at first. Mostly they called me Claire, and that was enough. Then, one snowy Monday morning, Rebecca Hayes arrived carrying 2 boxes of donated children's coats. "You have an admirer," she said. "What does that mean?" Someone covered emergency utility assistance for 5 families. Anonymous. My first thought was Elizabeth. My second was that it did not matter. If she had done it, she had finally learned how to help without placing herself at the center. If she had not, then Second Door was already becoming larger than either of us. 2 days later, I was sorting canned food when the office door opened and cold air swept across the room. Elizabeth stood there wearing jeans, winter boots, and a navy coat. No assistant. No driver waiting beside her. No folder in her hands. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Your organization has a website, Claire. It has 3 pages. I read all 3. I tried not to smile. Why are you here? Elizabeth looked around at the mismatched shelves, donated coats, cardboard boxes, and handwritten schedule taped beside the door. Then she looked back at me. I heard you needed volunteers. We cannot afford your usual rate. That is fortunate. I am not charging you. The humor faded from her face. I am not here with a job offer. I am not here to fund this place. And I am not here to tell you what it should become. I waited. Elizabeth took one careful step closer, then stopped, leaving several feet between us. I am here because I miss someone, she said quietly, and I finally understand that caring about her does not give me authority over her life. My chest tightened. Beside me sat a heavy box of canned vegetables waiting to be carried upstairs. I picked it up, walked toward Elizabeth, and placed it carefully into her arms. Storage room. Second floor. She looked toward the narrow staircase. How many steps? 48. Elizabeth sighed. You counted them specifically for this moment, did you not? This time I smiled. Maybe. She carried the box toward the stairs without another word. I watched her go, realizing that Elizabeth Harrington had once entered my life from the highest floor of a glass tower. Now she was climbing 48 ordinary steps carrying canned vegetables because I had allowed her to stay. And somehow, that meant more to me than anything her billions could have bought. Elizabeth returned the following Saturday at 9 in the morning, carrying 2 coffees and wearing the same navy coat. I brought one for you, she said. That sounds suspiciously like bribery. It is coffee, Claire. From a place that charges $7 for coffee. Elizabeth handed me the cup. Then consider it a very small grant. I laughed, and something between us became easier. After that, she came almost every Saturday. She carried donation boxes, sorted winter coats, answered phones, and once spent nearly an hour assembling a bookshelf that leaned so badly I had to take it apart after she left. I never told her. What mattered was that Elizabeth never arrived with solutions I had not requested. When Second Door needed an attorney, she asked whether I wanted a recommendation. When our refrigerator stopped working, she asked whether she could replace it. Every question was small, but I understood what each one meant. She was learning to leave room for my answer. 6 weeks after her first volunteer shift, we stayed late organizing supplies after everyone else had gone home. Snow drifted past the windows, and the bakery downstairs filled our office with the warm smell of bread. Elizabeth was folding donated sweaters when I caught her staring at a crooked photograph on the wall. You can straighten it, I said. I was waiting for permission. For a picture? I am practicing. I smiled. You really have changed. Her expression became serious. I needed to. She placed the sweater down carefully. I spent most of my life believing that caring for someone meant anticipating what they needed before they asked. In business, that instinct made me successful. With you, it made me arrogant. Elizabeth, please let me finish. Her voice was gentle. I missed you before you resigned. I missed you while you were sitting across from me in meetings, because there were things I wanted to say that I had no right to say, while I was your chief executive officer. My heartbeat quickened. What things? She looked suddenly less like a billionaire, and more like a woman taking an unfamiliar risk. That I looked forward to every community visit because you would be there. That you made me laugh when I had forgotten how often I used to. That after the storm, I kept thinking about that little girl asking whether we were family. The room seemed to grow quieter. Claire, I care about you. Not as an employee. Not as a project. And I am not asking you to give me anything because of that. I stepped closer. I do not need someone to rescue me. I know. I do not need your money to make Second Door important. I know that too. And I will never build my life around someone else's expectations again. Elizabeth held my gaze. I would never ask you to. Then what are you asking? She paused before answering. For the chance to walk beside you if that is what you choose. For most of my life, love had seemed tangled with approval. Be successful enough. Sensible enough. Become what someone needed and maybe they would stay. Elizabeth was offering something different. A choice without a condition attached. I reached across the small space between us and took her hand. Her fingers closed gently around mine. Dinner, I said. Elizabeth blinked. Dinner. Friday night. 7 o'clock. No business. No foundation. No discussion about refrigerators. A slow smile appeared on her face. Are you asking me on a date? Do not make this difficult. I would not dare. I smiled back, realizing the most important part was not that I had chosen Elizabeth. It was that I had chosen myself first. And because of that, whatever came next would belong equally to both of us. 3 months after our first dinner, I stood beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Harrington Foundation annual gala and watched my parents walk into the ballroom. For 1 second, I forgot how to breathe. I had not invited them. Second Door Chicago had grown from 26 families to more than 100, and that evening the foundation was recognizing our program alongside 5 other community organizations. A local newspaper had published a feature about us that morning. Apparently, success had finally made my life interesting enough for my family to notice. Claire. My mother approached first, wearing the careful smile she used whenever she wanted everything to feel normal. My father and Michael followed. We read the article, she said. You have done something remarkable. I should have felt proud hearing those words. Instead, I remembered 31 families, an empty chair, and my father asking when I planned to return to a real career. Thank you, I said. Dad glanced around the ballroom. Your mother and I have been talking. Michael knows several investors who could help you expand. Michael looked uncomfortable. Dad, that is not exactly what I said. Second Door is expanding without investors, I replied. Of course, but now that people are paying attention, you should think bigger. There it was. Now that a newspaper had written about me. Now that wealthy donors knew my name. Now that Elizabeth Harrington's foundation was honoring my work. My mother touched my arm. We always knew you were capable of something like this. I gently stepped back. No, Mom. You did not. Her smile disappeared. Claire. When I told you about the families we helped, you called my career wasted potential. When I talked about work I loved, you asked when I would become serious about my future. You did not believe in this before other people decided it mattered. Dad's expression tightened. We were trying to protect you. The words almost made me laugh. I had heard them before from someone else, but Elizabeth had learned what they really meant. Protection without listening is still control. Dad looked past me, and I knew immediately whom he had seen. Elizabeth was approaching from across the ballroom in a dark navy suit. She stopped beside me, leaving enough space that I could decide whether to close it. Dad noticed. Is this because of her? No. That is exactly the point. I looked directly at him. Elizabeth did not make me valuable. She did not build Second Door for me. She did not rescue me. She learned to respect my choices, even when they were not the choices she wanted. My mother's eyes lowered. Dad extended a hand toward me. Come home Sunday. We will sit down as a family and discuss what happens next. Something inside me became completely calm. You do not get to believe in me only after someone richer than you does. Silence settled between us. Dad stared at me as if he were finally meeting the daughter he had spent years trying to redesign. Claire, come with us. Elizabeth spoke for the first time. She is with me now. My father turned toward her. Elizabeth's voice remained quiet. Not because I decide where Claire belongs. I learned that lesson the difficult way. She chooses her own life. I simply stand beside her when she does. Her hand rested near mine, waiting rather than reaching. I chose to take it. My mother's eyes filled with emotion. We love you. I love you too, I said. But loving me cannot mean loving only the version of me. You understand. My father opened his mouth, then stopped. For once he offered no advice. No plan. No correction. He simply looked at me and slowly nodded. As Elizabeth and I walked toward the other side of the ballroom, I realized my family had not lost me in one dramatic moment. They had lost pieces of me every time they asked me to become smaller, safer, or more familiar. If they wanted those pieces back, they would have to learn something Elizabeth already had. Loving someone begins with allowing them to belong to themselves. For several weeks after the gala, my family did something I had never expected them to do. They gave me space. My father did not call with a plan for Second Door. My mother did not send articles about careers she thought I should consider. Michael texted once to say he was proud of me, then added something more important. I should have said that years ago. The first real step came in a handwritten letter from my mother. She apologized without explaining herself away. She admitted that she had confused security with happiness, and that every time she encouraged me toward the life she understood, she had failed to ask whether it was the life I wanted. My father took longer. His first message contained only 5 words. I am trying to understand. I did not rush to make everything comfortable again. Forgiveness, I had learned, was not the same as pretending nothing happened. Love could open a door, but trust still had to walk through it. Over the following year, Second Door Chicago grew beyond the 2 crooked rooms above the bakery. We moved into a renovated community building on the west side with counseling rooms, classrooms, a child care area, and a kitchen where families could share meals without feeling like they were asking for charity. Elizabeth supported me when I asked and stepped back when I did not. Sometimes she still caught herself trying to solve problems before I finished describing them. Now I only had to raise one eyebrow. I was listening, she would say. You were planning. I can do both. That is exactly the problem. Then she would smile and listen. My family changed in smaller ways. Mom began volunteering twice a month. Michael helped people prepare resumes and practice job interviews. Dad remained the hardest to read. Then one Saturday morning, I found him kneeling beside a loose cabinet door in the community kitchen with a toolbox beside him. Mom said this needed fixing, he said. I waited for advice about funding, expansion, or management. None came. Thank you, Dad. He nodded and returned to the cabinet. It was not a grand apology. Somehow, it meant more because it was an action. 1 year after the gala, we opened our second door location. During the celebration, my mother insisted on taking a family photograph. For a moment, I remembered that dinner years earlier and the camera flashing while I stood alone in the kitchen. I remembered the empty chair at the edge of the table, and how easily everyone had continued without noticing I was missing. This time Michael called across the room. Claire, we are waiting for you. I looked toward them. Nobody told me where to stand. Nobody asked what I planned to do next. They simply waited. Elizabeth stood several feet away, talking with volunteers. She caught my eye and smiled, making no move to join unless I wanted her there. I held out my hand. Elizabeth. She came to me, and I brought her into the photograph. Later, after the families and volunteers had gone home, we stood outside beneath the warm light of the second door sign. Are you happy? Elizabeth asked. I thought about the woman I had been when this began, measuring her worth through her family's approval. Yes, I said. But not because they finally understand me. Elizabeth waited. I am happy because I no longer need them to. She took my hand. Behind us was a place built from choices I had made for myself. Ahead of us was a life neither woman needed to control. My family had learned to see me again, but I had learned something even more important. The empty chair had never proved that I did not belong. It only showed that I had spent too long waiting for someone else to give me a place. Real love was different. Real love did not assign you a seat. It made room for you to arrive as yourself.